Hello, everyone. This is Mark Peterson with the Frog Outside the Well Research Center. Today, I'm introducing our fourth in the series by the Korean Cultural Center of Los Angeles. We did two videos on Pak Ji-won, and this is the second of two videos on Pak Jega. Here, we talk about Pak Jega overcoming prejudice as a seoja and becoming a great scientist and philosopher in the Shirhak movement of Korea, the late 18th and 19th century. So here's our video done by the Korean Center in Los Angeles. One of my favorite poems of Pak Jega is one where he talks about using medicine that he picked up in China to cure illnesses that Koreans had. And he wrote a poem about it. Pak Jega and Pak Ji-won were members of the northern school of Shirhak, and they were both influenced by their travel to China and the things they learned and saw in China. And they were both scientists, really interested in science. You think in the modern university, you take science classes in the science building, you take humanities classes in the humanities buildings, but they did both. They combined them. They were scientists as well as humanists. So they shared that in common. Pak Jega was one of the four librarians, all famous scholars who suffered from the limitation of being seoja and coming from seoja lineages. And they worked together. They had limitations. They could only get promoted to a certain level. They wouldn't promote them to the higher ranks. But in their ranks as scholars, they did a lot of things and wrote books together and achieved a lot in overcoming some of the obstacles that were in their way as seoja. His work was really interesting in a number of ways. He wrote really scientific sorts of things. He had gone to China. Here again, that China trip was very, very influential on him. And he saw the Jesuits, the Westerners that were there. And he was very much interested in scientific innovation, and not just science in a simple sense, but in a broad sense, in terms of economic reform, in terms of mathematics, in terms of military. He wrote a book with Lee Dong-mu, one of the other of the four librarians, on military science, where it was a manual of how to handle all these kinds of weapons that they had. And they had artillery, multiple firing rockets, cannon, of course, and archery, and swords, and spears, and all these sorts of things. There's a whole book on how to handle all these different kinds of arms that they had. So he was very broadcast in his looking at scientific things. Pak Jega and the other Shirhak philosophers were really interesting in that they were breaking away from the Confucian tradition, but they were breaking away and holding on at the same time. For example, they didn't revert to Hangul. They wrote all their things in Hanja, because that was the symbol of the scholar, to write things in these Chinese characters in the Hanja. And as such, to be recognized as a scholar, they had to be able to write. And they wrote poetry as well as the scientific and technical sorts of things. One of my favorite poems of Pak Jega is one where he talks about using medicine that he picked up in China to cure illnesses that Koreans had. And he wrote a poem about it. And it was really marvelous, because it's this interesting blend of the scientific and the humanitarian, or the humanist, in him. And he wrote several other poems. Any scholar who's worth his salt could write poetry in Chinese characters. So that was Pak Jega.